This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. This Tuesday's show begins with advice from K-State weed science specialist Sarah Lancaster on spring herbicide applications for wheat. Today, Sarah emphasizes the importance of wheat growing stages when it comes to the timing of application for these products. We are also joined today by Cherokee County Ag Agent Dale Helwig. Dale joins us today to talk about his involvement with the Farmers Accelerating Research and Material Science Workshop, which will be taking place this May at the 4-State Farm Show. We round out today's programming with K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk, looking at findings from the Holstein Association. He shares information on the relationship between classification score and herd life, along with productivity over time. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by K-State weed science specialist Sarah Lancaster for a conversation on spring herbicide decisions for wheat. So before we get into things, Sarah, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for the invitation, Samantha. Always happy to come over.
Absolutely. So with wheat specifically, obviously herbicides, you have to have many considerations to keep in mind. But with wheat specifically, growing stages really matter for this crop, right?
Right. So when we think about herbicide label requirements, we often think about rates and adjuvant requirements and things of that nature. But we also need to think about application timings. And oftentimes there's sort of a don't apply before aspect of that, and then there's also a don't apply after a certain growth stage aspect of that. So it's important that folks pay attention to both of those. And, the other thing I wanted to say at this point, Samantha, is that I know a lot of folks are making tough decisions about wheat right now, and that some wheat is behind. So maybe folks are trying to keep that stand. So maybe they should pay extra attention to that aspect of not applying before a certain growth stage if their wheat is slow, but they still want to keep it.
Some of those timelines this year may be a little different than what most producers are used to, like the week of the month or whatever, things like that.
Yeah, yep. So the odd spring, kind of hot and cold back and forth, has had things kind of messed up. We were just talking about how that's going to affect our corn planting and our plots this year. So, yep.
Absolutely. Good things to remember. And when we think about these stages, what are really the key ones to remember when we're considering application times?
Yeah, so the one that we want to talk about first is the herbicide that's most important to remember that don't apply before a certain growth stage comes really into play here, and that's 2,4-D. We like 2,4-D for its efficacy on a lot of the mustards in particular, but broadleaf weeds in general. But it's important that we don't apply 2,4-D until the wheat has fully tillered. So we think about 2,4-D again as a broadleaf herbicide, but it does affect grasses. So in wheat, we think about that as affecting the wheat's ability to tiller. So you don't want to apply 2,4-D too early. But other things to remember, the growth stage, when we think about, don't apply the herbicide after a certain growth stage, probably the first one that affects a lot of herbicides is jointing. Right. And so, Dr. Lolato's wheelhouse is talking about wheat growth stages and stuff. But basically, jointing is that period of stem elongation. Right. So sometimes you might have to look a little close to see where those nodes are. But jointing is an important one. And so some products that we can apply to wheat before jointing. One that's fairly common would be dicamba. If you're in kochia country, dicamba is an important one. So that could be used there. I actually got a call about jointing applications in wheat just last week, and it was for coaxium wheat. So we have a couple of different herbicide-tolerant types of wheat. One is coaxium. The herbicide that's applied to coaxium is aggressor. So aggressor herbicide, even the new formulation of aggressor, which is aggressor AX, and it has an additional safener in it, the label still reads that those applications need to be made before jointing. Similar would be for Clearfield. So we have 2-gene Clearfield wheats would be the more prevalent on the marketplace right now. And they can actually be applied until you can see that second node at the surface of the soil. So those are two options, and also two things to remember, that the Beyond herbicide goes with Clearfield and the aggressor herbicides go with coaxium. Do not cross the two or bad things will happen. Just to run down a list of other things that can be applied prior to jointing, we've got products like Agility, Olympus, Outrider, Powerflex, Rave would be a fairly common one, and Tarzec, which is a newer one from Corteva.
Great. Excellent reminders. So those are all prior to jointing. So as the growing stages progress, the next stage, I guess, would be boot. That would be kind of the next thing we would think about.
Right. So thinking about boot stage, we've got that head starting to kind of express itself, right? And so we're at increased risk due to the physiology of the plant of causing damage to that spike as it emerges if we apply herbicides too late. The other thing we have to start thinking about is harvest intervals here, right? Because all of our crops are going to be sold at some point, and it's very likely that they'll be tested for herbicide residues. And so a lot of these application stages, in addition to crop safety, also have this idea of residue tolerance in mind. So kind of two things going on there that folks need to be cognizant of. So we've already talked a little bit about 2,4-D on the front end. On the back end, 2,4-D is a product that needs to be applied prior to boot stage. Some other products in that same growth regulator family would be things like Starane products. You wouldn't want to apply those after boot stage. You know, Starane, again, would be kind of a kochia country type of consideration there for us. MCPA is a product that we don't spend a lot of time talking about in this context of Group 4 herbicides, but it's actually a good choice for wheat. It tends to be safer than 2,4-D in terms of causing crop response. So I do know a lot of folks will, kind of top dress with MCPA with their fertilizer application in early spring to control some of those small broadleaf weeds. So that's one to think about. Another thing to think about is we're talking about 2,4-D and MCPA is the formulation. We spent a lot of time talking about formulations of growth regulator products a few years ago when dicamba was a big issue. So we need to remember that these growth regulator herbicides, they're weak acids, which means that we can monkey with some of the building blocks of that molecule to affect how it interacts in the spray solution and in the environment. So these weak acids, 2,4-D and MCPA, they can come in either amine or ester formulations. Oftentimes, we'll think about the ester formulation as being more effective. It tends to interact a little bit better with the cuticle on the plant and get into the plant a little bit better. The amine formulations, on the other hand, tend to be less volatile. So being aware of your environment and how important it is to reduce off-target movement, drift, volatility in particular, could help some folks make that determination if they want to use the ester formulation or the amine formulation. If you wanted to run down a list of other products that can be applied through boot, some other things would be products like Amber, Finesse, or Glean, or products that contain chlorsulfuron.
Great. Excellent reminders. Awesome. And then so the next stage, again, going through wheat physiology here, learning those steps myself, would be kind of the flag leaf stage. That would be the next major stage to keep in mind.
Right. So the flag leaf is the very last leaf that comes out, right? It's that one that has been protecting that spike as it's coming out. So there are quite a few herbicides that can be applied through flag leaf. So some of those products would be a lot of the products that are based around haloxifin, which is a relatively new active ingredient from Corteva. Haloxifin alone is called Elevore. Elevore actually doesn't have a label for application on wheat through flag leaf, but some of the products that contain haloxifin include Pixaro, which is a combination with Starane, so you can see some of the benefits there, Culex, Resuvent, and Wide R Match, which is Starane and Stinger or clopyralid. So they're going to control largely broadleaf weeds, so things like mare's tail, henbit, etc.
And those are obviously in conjunction with other products, like you said, so not really advised to use just the singular product itself.
Yeah, we in weed science are, broken records talking about the importance of applying herbicides in combination with each other. So some other things that could go out at that flag leaf growth stage, affinity products, Ally, Express, Harmony products, Husky, Centralis, Talinor, and Wide Match.
Excellent. So plenty of options there when we think about broadleaf control towards the end of our crop, right?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah, a plethora of options for producers out there. Obviously, they have their pick at a lot of them, but really just wanted to hone in on that reminder that there is differences in these stages and what can and can't be applied.
Absolutely. It's important to have footprints in your field before the tire tracks arrive from the sprayer so you know what you can and can't do.
Absolutely. And now's the time to be doing so, folks. It's gotten warm and things are starting to hopefully green up in your area as we hope for more precipitation on our radars here in the future. But Sarah, you also wrote an Agronomy eUpdate about this exact topic, so we'll link to that as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Samantha.
Yeah, thanks so much again for joining us, Sarah. Once again, everyone, that was K-State Weed Science Specialist Sarah Lancaster joining us for a conversation on spring herbicide decisions for wheat. More detailed information, again, can be found in Sarah's KSU Agronomy eUpdate article, which is titled, Pay Attention to Growth Stage for Spring Herbicide Decisions on Wheat. The link to that article can also be found in today's show notes on agtoday.net. Also in today's show notes, an additional resource, the 2023 Chemical Weed Control for Field Crops, Pastures, and Non-Cropland. The guide is available through the K-State Research and Extension bookstore, as well as your local extension office. We're about to cut to a short break, but before we do, a reminder on what's still to come on Agriculture Today on this Tuesday's program. When we return from our short break, we're going to be joined by Cherokee County Ag Agent Dale Helwig. Dale joins us today to talk about his involvement with the Farmers Accelerating Research and Materials Science Workshop, otherwise known as the FARMS Workshops. We recently spoke about these several weeks ago with Tim Dawsey from Pittsburgh State University, and today Dale continues that conversation from his perspective as an ag agent here at K-State. After that, we'll end today's show with our K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk for this week's Milk Lines. This week, Mike discusses findings from the Holstein Association. He goes through today information on the relationship between classification scores and herd life, along with productivity over time. Once again, we're cutting to a short break now, but when we return, we'll be back with all of that and more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are joined now by Cherokee County Ag Agent Dale Helwig for a conversation on a topic we actually talked about last week very briefly with one of our guests, and it's the FARMS workshops that are coming up. And Dale, this is a program that you have helped collaborate on in the last several years, so tell us a bit about it.
So this kind of kicked off back in 2019. Tim Dawsey approached several of our county agents about getting involved with having farmers introduce themselves to scientists, understanding the problems farmers and ranchers face every day, and then seeing if these scientists could maybe solve some of these problems. And so we started collaborating back in 2019. In 2020, just prior to COVID, we had our first farms conference. It was a hit. We had probably 70 people in a small little room just discussing the problems and trials we have in agriculture. And it was a really neat kind of a setting because for once in our lives, the scientists just sat down and shut up and let the farmers just talk about their problems. And let me tell you, farmers can talk about their problems. And so it was just a really great day of communicating, and the scientists would kind of look cross-eyed, like, what are you guys talking about weaning calves? I mean, they didn't understand the terminology. So as county agents, that's where we got to step in and define the terminologies between scientists and farmers and ranchers. And that was a really fun day. The following day, the county agents just met with the scientists to talk about what they heard in the program. And then the scientists started collaborating like, hey, they have this issue over here with herbicides. I think we can maybe do something with that. And so those scientists, it was neat to see those conversations that they began collaborating on possible solutions, possible research dollars, grants, and things like that. So Tim kind of came up with the name. It was FARMS, which is kind of fitting for what we do, but it was Farmers Accelerating Research in Material Science, and that's polymers or plastics as we know it. So it's been an ongoing project. We've kind of run through a couple of cycles. We had one last year in 2022, and then this year we have the opportunity to be at the Pittsburgh Farm Show. So we're kind of excited about that because we won't be pulling for just local farmers. There's about 15,000 people that come to this farm show. So this is a regional deal, and we encourage everybody to come down there, take an hour of their time, and visit with some scientists and ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an incredible opportunity for sure. Like you said, for farmers to kind of express some of the challenges that they face on a daily basis and have a scientist hear those and then kind of come up with a crazy idea or solution to some of those problems. Incredible. And you had the chance to kind of act as an interpreter of sorts, it sounds like. You
know, we're always told to be facilitators, and that was, it's just really fun to kind of, you know, the farmers say, well, I have problems with mud. Well, why, Joe, do you have problems with mud? And then we talked about that, UAN, nobody knows what the terminology UAN is, as well as liquid fertilizer, and rust out equipments. Well, why is it rust out equipments? And then, there's where the polymers, they understand what that means. So, could they possibly come up with a polymer-based paint to put on these equipment so they wouldn't rust out when we're spraying liquid fertilizer or liquid herbicide? So that conversation was just so neat, and to dig into why are these actual problems? I mean, we know they're problems, but why are they problems? Getting to the why, and then the scientists getting to the how can we fix it was really neat.
Absolutely. A cool process to watch from start to finish, I'm sure. And you mentioned that this year you guys decided to take it to the farm show. Again, that's taking place May 19th through 21st this year. And the goal with that is really just to expand the people, the farmers, producers that could come to you with some of these problems they're facing, right?
Yes. So we kind of tapped out what we have here in the local Cherokee, Labette, Crawford County area, But, as you expand, you get into the Flint Hills. We're bringing people in from Kansas City. The people come all the way from well into Missouri and Oklahoma. And not that we all don't have some similar challenges, but there's some different challenges in weather and crops and different things, tools that we may use. So this is a good time to bring everybody together. In the past, we've always done a full day workshop with the farmers, and that's hard for a farmer to take a full day out of their job just to come talk to a bunch of scientists that you don't know. So we decided to shorten it down into 1 hour increments, and this will just be a 1 hour session for the farmers to talk. The scientists aren't really going to talk at all. We're going to facilitate the conversation again and draw those problems out. It'll just be for an hour. We're going to meet at 11 o'clock on Friday and Saturday there at the farm show on the interior spot where all the interior exhibits are. And then on Sunday, we'll meet at 1 o'clock. So, after you walk the farm show for a couple hours, come sit in a chair and gripe about your problems and then get back up after your rest and go walk some more of the farm show.
Absolutely. A therapy session of sorts.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to blow off some steam.
Wonderful. Well, this year, especially this past year, has been an interesting one that I think has presented some unique challenges. Do you expect to hear some of those challenges this year specifically?
Yeah, and we've heard challenges before. Some of it, we talk about the weather. Right now we're still in a drought down here in southeast Kansas. So we talk about water retention. Is there some kind of a polymer that they can put in an irrigation system that would let that water stick to the plant a little longer? A bio-based polymer, that would degrade and not cause any harm to the environment. I know Virginia Tech is one of the supporting schools on that. They were already starting to look at some bio-based polymers to put with herbicides to help the herbicides stick to the weeds longer. So that's kind of cool. I don't know where they are in the research. I don't communicate with them every day, but we got some things like that. We talk about weather. We've had some cold days, DEF on our diesel freeze is really easy. Is there some bio-based polymer we can put with DEF to keep it freezing at a lower temperature maybe? So the last few times we've had some different discussions, and just to kind of throw out there some things that we talked about at the last farms, we talked about what's behind the barn. So, everybody has those old junk tires, or the big thing that came out with those plastic herbicide totes that we have. What can we do? And so we actually are in the process of trying to work through a recycling program for farmers to be able to recycle those totes. So that is one thing positive. We haven't got the solution yet, but we're working towards recycling those plastic totes for herbicides and pesticides, because if not, they're just filling up landfills. We'll talk about crop issues. We'll talk about livestock issues. And then, of course, some chemical issues that you and I have discussed. So.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like the options are limitless here in terms of where the discussion could go, and some cutting edge research that could come of it potentially, it sounds like, too.
Yes, and one of the things we're kind of looking into now, we've been in contact with a couple of scientists on the drones in ag. They got to make a lightweight drone, but yet can carry enough, because we're talking about spraying pastures. So if we can make that lighter and heavier duty, can they carry more gallons so they can run without having to refuel as often? So, there's a lot of things. I like the way Tim put it. He says from the time a farmer puts on his shoes in the morning and gets mud on them till they turn off the tractor at night, what's all those problems from dawn to dusk that farmers are fighting? So.
Sounds like it's going to be an incredible event that producers that are tuning in will definitely not want to miss out on. So again, those of you that are tuning in that are going to be already at the farm show, why not go ahead and take advantage of this 1 hour opportunity again each day, May 19th through the 21st at the farm show this year. Dale, it sounds like it's going to be fun.
Thank you, Samantha. It will be.
Once again, everyone, that was Dale Helwig. He is an ag agent out of Cherokee County here at K-State, joining us for a conversation on the upcoming farms workshops taking place again at the Farm Show, May 19th through the 21st. Before we cut to a short break, we're going to tune into a recent wheat scoop from Marcia Boswell with the Kansas Wheat Commission.
The registration date for the annual Hard Winter Wheat Quality Tour is coming up on May 1st, but hotel blocks will be released soon. The tour, which is sponsored by the Wheat Quality Council, brings in participants from around the world who are tied to the wheat industry but may not ever have been in fields. These individuals are able to interact with Kansas farmers, network with their peers, learn more about wheat production, and assess the condition and yield potential of the hard winter wheat crop across the state of Kansas. This year's tour dates will be May 15th through the 18th. Participants gain a first-hand understanding of what it takes for farmers to grow, manage, harvest, and market the crop. Over the 3-day tour, they will canvass the state's wheat crop from Manhattan to Colby to Wichita and back again. Along the way, they will stop every 15 miles or so to estimate yields in wheat fields along their routes. Every car will carry at least one wheat tour veteran who is not only familiar with the route, but also basic agronomy and the yield estimate formula. This allows participants to ask questions about the wheat that they're seeing, as well as diseases, growing conditions, field observations, and more. According to Dave Green, Executive Vice President of the Wheat Quality Council, these tours are a tremendous learning experience for any new people in the industry. This training and mentoring opportunity is an extremely good value for the amount of fundamental wheat industry knowledge that a person can acquire in just 3 short days. Foreign and domestic buyers of Kansas wheat will participate, giving those folks a chance to see the wheat that they trade, mill, bake, and ship growing in the Kansas fields. Tours have seen upwards of 120 participants in the past, giving Kansas farmers the chance to interact with and influence their customers around the globe. More than 600 crop evaluations will be made in wheat fields throughout the state, and yield estimates made using a formula developed by the National Agricultural Statistics Service. Participants are sure to see drought conditions across much of the state. As of April 9th, Kansas winter wheat condition rated 61% poor to very poor, 26% fair, and only 13% good to excellent, according to USDA NASS. For Kansas farmers, you don't have to be on the Wheat Quality Council's Hard Winter Wheat Tour to scout wheat fields and make your own estimates. To help, we have compiled the steps participants will use to estimate yields so you too can participate. Visit our website at kswheat.com to get a step-by-step tutorial for calculating yields using the same method as tour participants. This year's formula will be released on May 15th. Register for the wheat tour at wheatqualitycouncil.org. Encourage others from your organization to join you. A better educated wheat industry is beneficial to all of us. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. Data from the Holstein Association shows how classification score is related to herd life, as well as how productive animals might be in the herd over time. K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk looks at the findings and how producers can use classification scores to improve efficiency within the herd.
I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning how conformation may help cows stay in your herd longer. Some recent information that has been put together by Holstein Association gives us some new information about how classification score is related to herd life, as well as how productive animals might be in your herd over time. One of the things that they did with the information that they gathered was they gathered information over a large number of animals across the United States. They looked at conformation scores and tried to determine which traits were going to be most related to early culling. Some of the interesting things that came out of the study is that things that tended to lead to early culling the most would be things like fore-udder attachment, rear udder height, udder depth, rear udder width. So when we start looking at classification scores and we try to justify, so why do we keep animals in our herd and why do we spend the money on classification, might be some other things to consider here. If animals stay in your herd longer, what is that worth in your dairy herd? One of the things that they looked at was lifetime energy-corrected milk correlation with first lactation final score. Interesting is they divided the animals up into quartiles. 85 to 90 point animals had a much higher energy-corrected lifetime milk production than those that had a lower final score at the end of their first lactation. In fact, those that scored less than 60 produced many thousands pounds less energy-corrected milk over their lifetime than those that scored in the 85 to 90 category. So when we start thinking about how this figures out in terms of dollars and cents, let's assume that we had $20 hundredweight milk, just an average price for our milk. As you look at gross revenue between cows, those animals that scored higher versus those that scored lower, that's almost $5,763 more gross revenue across their lifetime. So that classification cost that we pay every time the animal is classified really is something that we might want to consider when we consider the overall profitability of our farm. If we use classification as a culling reason to remove animals from our herd, we're likely increasing the overall productivity of our animals that are left in the herd. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension, encouraging our dairy farmers to take another look at classification scores and how that might improve the overall efficiency of their dairy farms.
Thanks, Mike. And while we have a moment, researchers at 4 universities, 3 in the U.S. and 1 in China, say that increasingly warmer weather patterns in the Corn Belt could increase the growth of a toxin that would swell farmers' losses and threaten an important food source over the next 2 decades. Their study takes a look at the growing incidence of aflatoxin in corn grown in Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri, eastern Nebraska, and eastern Kansas, a region traditionally known as the U.S. Corn Belt, as it relates to changing weather patterns in those areas. Jesse Tack, an agricultural economist at Kansas State University and co-author of the study, notes that the estimates correspond to a worst-case climate change scenario and thus are likely to be smaller than estimated if credible mitigation and adaptation strategies are leveraged. The researchers' study, which has been recently published in the journal Environmental Research Letters, suggests that 89.5% of corn-growing counties in 15 states will experience increased aflatoxin contamination in 2031 through 2040 compared to 2011 through 2020. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Samantha Bennett, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.